If you think that the box is small, just wait until you see the gimbal itself. Hi, I'm Marta, and today I've got something pretty cool and pretty tiny. This is ENQUIRIES Pocket 2. Feiyu means flying fish if you're interested. But this is a camera with a motorized gimbal, 3-axis gimbal. It's not the first gimbal I had my hands on, but this is definitely the smallest one. I mean, without the motorized part, it's only that big. It's fresh on the market and it comes in two flavors, as a Pocket 2 and Pocket 2S. And I know you want to ask what is the difference between them. Well, this is a Pocket 2. It comes with Wi-Fi and it looks like this. Now, Pocket 2S doesn't have a Wi-Fi, but it has something, very strange and something I've not come across before on the gimbals, which means that the camera itself is actually connected to the main unit with a cable. It might look silly to you, but actually I could find a couple of use cases just for that. But anyway, I've been given a Pocket 2 to review, so that's the unit we're going to focus on. As I'm opening the box for you, it's worth mentioning that this sensor is 12 megapixel and it has a video capability of running at 4K and 60 frames per second natively. Yes, no upscaling like on Xiaomi Palm. That's not the only cool thing, because lower down the resolution and you can actually get up to 120 frames per second if you're using 1080p resolution. I already mentioned the 2.4 GHz Wi-Fi that you can use to connect this thing, and pretty good battery life, which is gonna last you over 3 hours, which is probably the longest I've got on my selection of gimbals. Inside the box there is a gimbal, obviously, and you'll also find a nice plastic cover. It's actually quite handy and I really appreciate companies adding those covers, not like Xiaomi Palm again. Even my Mystery 3000 gimbal had a nice case, so it's a step in a great direction. Now the case, despite being plastic, isn't obnoxious. It has cutouts for charging, very well thought, and actually can accommodate for existing small leash that you can attach to the gimbal so you wouldn't lose it. Makes sense, because like I said, this is a really small gimbal. Now the body is made of machined aluminium and it feels really sturdy in hand. I mean, most of the parts, apart from a couple of slots probably for antennas, are made from aluminium. Although I wouldn't recommend it, I'm pretty sure that gimbal would survive a drop without taking a damage. I'm very pleased to see USB Type-C on board for charging. The charging takes just over an hour, and include a 1/4-inch screw so you could mount this thing on a tripod. And unlike on Xiaomi Palm, this is actually quite useful because the screw is located at the bottom. To operate the gimbal, you have 2 buttons, joystick, which also acts as a button, and obviously a touch screen display with gestures. The gimbal itself can be used without any apps, so you can just take it as it is and go start shooting. That's good, but if you want to extend the functionality, you will have to download the app. I'm going to talk about it in a second. First, let's talk about stabilization. By now I have a pretty good idea what to expect from videos and stabilization on the devices like this, because it's not my first rodeo, and I'm pleased to say that you're gonna be actually very pleased with the results. The video is really nicely stabilized, and whether you're trekking up the stairs, on the stones, etc., or even riding a bike, you'll be able to provide a nice, smooth footage. Obviously, all that stabilization is thanks to 3 motors that keep the camera on level. Now you can select a couple of different modes. First, you have a sensitivity of following your movement. So if you twist the camera left and right, you can either pick a smooth or more aggressive option, which is supposed to let you track motion better. Now the individual axes can be also locked, so for your disposal are 3 different modes. You can set the device to pan only, which means it will lock the tilt and pitch axis, allowing you to shoot really nice, really smooth footage. But if you want to have more controls, set it to follow mode, in which you will also be able to steer the gimbal up and down. But if you for some reason require pitch control, then use AI follow mode, which basically dampens all your movement on the wrists and make the movement of the camera less jittery. All this works pretty great and I have no objections so far. So let's talk about tracking, because well, things get a bit more tricky. Now, I was quite surprised to see tracking available at 4K at 60 frames per second, because even my mystery gimbal 3000 wasn't able to track at that frame set. Now, I quickly discovered that yes, it is possible to track your face at that resolution and frame rate. However, a lot of processing power actually goes into computing the video and compressing the video, so the tracking is quite unreliable in this mode. Now, dropping down to 30 frames per second or lowering the resolution provides you with slightly better effects, but what I've discovered, if you move too quickly or move away from the camera, the track is lost, and that's it, you're going to be outside of the frame. Now, to the device credit, it is able to regain the track once you back more or less to where you started your tracking, so that's a benefit, but I wish they actually worked on that a bit better. Object tracking isn't available in the menu of the gimbal itself. If you want to try it out, you'll have to connect a mobile app via Wi-Fi. Unfortunately, we have very similar problems. Now, I was tracking a can and I was tracking my persona in two different scenarios in which, to be honest, the tracking should be resolved properly. Unfortunately, if I was moving away from the gimbal, the track was lost and I was not able to track my movements. So it's clear to me that Feiyu has a lot of work to do in order to improve this. Now, I've mentioned already that the 4K 60 frames per second isn't upscaled, and that's a good thing if you're interested in shooting in 4K. Now, the footage is quite reasonable. Obviously, if you're gonna push it through a torture test, meaning shooting in the woodlands, all that foliage, etc., you will see compression artifacts on screen. It's not a magical wand. However, in a nice open spaces, the footage is actually quite good and I was pleased with the effects. From there, dropping down the resolution benefits you in a couple of ways. I've noticed if you make time lapses in 4K, they get slightly jittery, something that doesn't happen if the time lapse is shot at lower resolution. So this is something to bear in mind. Footage in 2K and 1080p respectively, it's actually pretty decent, especially if it's set to 60 frames per second, so don't be afraid to use these modes, especially if you don't tend to play DAT videos on 4K devices. To play about with your creative side, you have access to several different modes. Obviously, apart from classical photo and a video, a couple of pictures for you so you could take a look. You have an access to time-lapse, which is split into a time-lapse, motion-lapse and hyperlapse. Now, something I should really mention is that if you're using a gimbal itself, your motion lapse will be available only with 2 tracking points. This increases significantly if you use an app, so if you want to do more elaborate motion lapses, just fire up the app and connect to the gimbal and start the tracking from there. And as we experiment with time, it's probably worth mentioning about Slo-Mo. Now, personally, I'm not a big fan of Slo-Mo, especially that what this gimbal does is shoots things at 60 frames per second and plays them at 30, and that's your Slo-Mo. But something I should really mention, which is 1080p 120 frames per second. Now, on the surface, it does sound quite impressive. However, looking at the footage carefully, I think this is actually 1080p either interpolated or 720p interpolated to that frame rate, which, well, it has that many frames, but it doesn't look as impressive, and for the most part you'll be more pleased with 1080p at 60 frames per second in my opinion. And to wrap up the modes, you also have access to panoramas, so you can automatically stitch up pictures for a nice and big shots. Overall, the video quality is quite good, however there is one problem. If you pay a closer attention to the gimbal, you'll notice that the microphone pinhole is located at the bottom of the device. And this is a place where you're often going to get it covered with your palm. At least my palms, well, they're not exactly big, but because the gimbal is quite small, it's very easy to cover that hole. And it doesn't actually help that the microphone itself is set to very quiet. Good morning and welcome to a beautiful Monday, where we're going to test right now face tracking on the Feiyu Pocket 2 gimbal. Face tracking and a microphone as well, especially in outdoor conditions where you're most likely to be shooting. And by the way, welcome to Labman, this is where I work. My attempts to boost the microphone in a pro mode resulted in pretty much the same footage, and it's very, very quiet. I think Feiyu has to address that in the next firmware update, but a representative from the company mentioned that this device will support external microphones via USB Type-C and the extension that they're planning to sell. So I guess not all the hope is lost. However, yeah, as far as the current state of the microphone goes, it's not that good. Let's talk about the app itself. Now, to connect to the gimbal, just either press the record button for 3 seconds. We'll start creating AP point with 2.4 GHz network that you can connect to. Very simple. Now, the app itself, it's a bit rough around the edges, so I'd like to see some improvements in the design layout. But for the most part, you will find all the functions that are available on the gimbal itself. I've mentioned a couple of extra options that are available via app that are not available in a gimbal. So you will be able to select multiple paths for your time lapses and do the object tracking. I already covered that at the beginning of this video, so we're gonna move on. One of the cool things that actually I've noticed is the ability to use your phone as a kind of remote for your gimbal. And I don't mean actually just looking through the gimbal and using the joystick to navigate the camera. You can use the built-in accelerometer in your phone to actually direct your gimbal position. And at first I thought it was quite gimmicky, and I was expecting this to work not as good, but in fact it works really well. I mean, I think they nailed the combination between keeping the movement with a low latency and smoothing it out so it don't becomes jittery. So when it comes to actually filming different things from far away, you can use your phone quite successfully to create really cool shots. I've actually used this gimbal for one of my upcoming reviews, and I've noticed one thing. As I was shooting in conservatory, the temperature inside was about 27 degrees. It was a quite sunny day. Now, I was shooting for about 45 minutes to 1 hour continuously, and the device got significantly hot. I mean, it wasn't burning my hand, but holding it in my hand was, well, let's say unpleasant. So this is something to bear in mind, and I think I know why they opted out for aluminium chassis. So Feiyu Pocket 2 is about to launch just about the same time as this video is being released. Now, advertised price is $359. However, my secret sources tell me that if you're quick, you will be able to secure yourself a nice discount that's going to bring the price down to under $300. So if you are interested in a gimbal itself and you don't mind the shortcomings, then you can find the link to this gimbal in the video description. So if you're looking for something that you can carry easily in your pocket with quite a bit of functions, then well, take a look at this, as long as you don't mind the things that are outlined in this video. As for now, guys, if you want to know what's going to happen next, then well, you know how to find me and you know how YouTube works. Use the tools provided to get notifications whenever there is a new video. But what I would like you to do is follow me on any given social media, so you could stay in touch, you could comment on the upcoming projects and give me ideas what to take a look at next. As for now, guys, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.